Hello, this is Dana with the 38th segment of the Master the Bible Today series, a snapshot of the book of Esther. Esther was written to demonstrate God's sovereignty and his loving care for his people. Although Esther follows Nehemiah in the Bible, its events are about 30 years prior to those recorded in Nehemiah. Esther is one of only two books named for women. Ruth is the other. The book is unusual in that in the original version, no name, title, or pronoun for God appears in it. This caused some church fathers to question its inclusion in the canon, or the sacred literature. But God's presence is clear throughout the book. Drama, power, romance, and intrigue. This is the stuff of which best-selling novels are made. However, more than an entertaining reading, Esther is a story of the profound interplay of God's sovereignty and human will. The setting is in the Persian Empire, and most of the action takes place in the king's palace in Susa, the Persian capital. The key people are Esther, Mordecai, King Xerxes I, and Haman. The book of Esther begins with Queen Vashti refusing to obey an order from her husband, King Xerxes. Fearing that this would cause other women in his kingdom to disobey their husbands, she was subsequently banished, and the search began for a new queen. The king sent out a decree to gather all the beautiful women in the empire and bring them into the royal harem. Esther, a young Jewish woman, was one of those chosen to be in the royal harem. King Xerxes was so pleased with Esther that he made her his queen. Meanwhile, Mordecai, Esther's older cousin, became a government official, and during his tenure, he foiled an assassination plot. However, he went unrewarded, and the ambitious and self-serving Haman, a descendant of King Agag, who was an enemy to and who had racial hatred of the Jews, was appointed second in command in the empire. Racial hatred is always sinful. We must never condone it in any form. Every person on earth has an intrinsic worth because God created mankind in his image. Therefore, God's people must stand against racism whenever and wherever it occurs. When Mordecai refused to bow in reverence to Haman, Haman became furious and determined to destroy Mordecai and all the Jews along with him. To accomplish this vengeful deed, Haman deceived the king and persuaded him to issue an edict condemning the Jews to death. Mordecai told Queen Esther about this edict, and she decided to risk her life to save her people. It takes great wisdom to survive in an unbelieving world. In a setting and society which is for the most part hostile to Christianity, we can demonstrate wisdom by giving respect to what is true and good, and by humbly standing against what is wrong. A key verse in Esther is found in chapter 4, verse 14, sent to Esther from Mordecai, which reads, quote, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this." Unquote. So Esther asks King Xerxes and Haman to be her guests at a banquet. During the feast, the king asked Esther what she really wanted, and he promised to give her anything. Esther simply invited both men to another banquet the next day. That night, unable to sleep, the king was flipping through some records in the royal archives when he read of the assassination plot that Mordecai thwarted. Surprised to learn that Mordecai had never been rewarded for this deed, the king asked Haman what should be done to properly thank a hero. Haman thought in his pride the king must be thinking about him, and so he described a lavish reward. The king agreed, but to Haman's shock and utter humiliation, he learned that Mordecai was the person to be honored. During the second banquet, the king again asked Esther what she desired. She replied that someone has plotted to destroy her and her people, and she named Haman as the culprit. Immediately, the king sentenced Haman to die on the gallows that he had built for Mordecai. The book of Esther is an example of God's divine guidance and care over our lives. The book of Esther tells of the circumstances that were essential to the survival of God's people in Persia. These circumstances were not the result of chance, but of God's grand design. God's sovereignty and power is over every area of life and are seen throughout this book. Although we may question certain circumstances in our lives, we must have faith that God is in control, working through both the pleasant and difficult times so that we can serve Him effectively. Because we trust God, we are not to fear what people may do to us. Instead, we are to be confident in God's control. As we unite our life's purposes to God's purpose, we benefit from His sovereign care. In the final act of this true life drama, Mordecai was appointed to Haman's position, and the Jews were guaranteed protection throughout the land. Because of Queen Esther's courageous act, a whole nation was saved. Seeing her God-given opportunity, she seized it. Her life made a difference. Read Esther and watch for God at work in your life. Perhaps He has prepared you to act in such a time as this. Chapter 4, verse 14. Thank you.